born in a previous century. I know I look way too young for that. But when I was about 9 years old, lived in upstate New York. I was born, brought up in the Northeast, New England, upstate New York. I tell people I got to Oklahoma as fast as I could. But my dad, we lived next to a feed store, and family-owned business, really nice folks, really friendly people, great folks, great neighbors. We were standing out on our property line one day, and my dad turned around to me and he said, "Stay away from that family." Their last name was the Nicholsons. He said, "Stay away from the Nicholsons. They're birchers. They're crazy. They're out in the woods every Saturday morning digging around in the woods looking for caches of communist weapons buried out there." This is my dad. It's the font of all knowledge. So imagine my surprise in 2008 when I went to the GOP convention here in Tulsa. I wasn't a delegate, but I was representing Eastern Oklahoma. I was a vice chair out there. Imagine my surprise when I was approached by a man in the lobby. First of all, we were asked to go to the OK Safe booth, Oklahomans for Sovereignty and Free Enterprise, and that they had some stuff for us. And so I went over there and I got my stuff, and one of those things was a magazine, and I opened it up and I started reading it, and I went, just like Dave Leggett did, "Oh, whoa, these people are naming names. They know what's going on. Who are they?" And a card pops out, the John Birch Society. Now, I was in my 50s, okay? Had never heard anything about the Birch Society from the time I was a little kid. Didn't know any of the controversy surrounding it or anything else. Nothing, okay? Until that day. And I got that magazine. I read the magazine before the convention, got done with the convention, and I wasn't in a very good mood because my candidate was basically railroaded out of that convention. And so I was walking out, and there's a lady sitting at one of these tables out in the hallway of the hotel room that we were in, and I just started to rant. I just stood there and started to rant, veins bulging out on my neck. And she says, "Yep, I know. You're right. I know what they do. You're right. I get it. You're right." And I'm thinking, this woman thinks I'm right. Everybody thinks I'm crazy, okay, except her. Well, I didn't know this, but she motioned across the lobby, and this elderly gentleman comes over, and he sticks out his hand, and he says, "Hi, I'm Don Crossan." He hands me a card, section leader with the John Birch Society. And I talked to him, well, I ranted at him, and he said, "Yeah, I know. You're right. I get it." And I looked into this man's eyes, and I thought to myself, he really does get it. He knows. He knows what's really going on. And he handed me a card, and he said, "Son," now 50-plus-year-old man, I love it when anybody calls me son. But he said, "Son," he said, "in a couple of days, you're gonna calm down." He said, "Would you please give me a call when you do?" And so I called him a couple of days later. I said, "Okay, I'm ready." He said, "Okay, I'm going to send you an application, and you're going to sign it, and you're going to send me $99 for you and your wife, and you're going to join the John Birch Society." I said, "Great." So I did that, and a few days later, he called me. He said, "I got your app." He said, "I want you to know you're going to be a great chapter leader." I said, "What's a chapter?" So we're living in Poto, Oklahoma, which is yellow dog Democrat, left wing, you name it, it's out there. And I started a chapter for the John Birch Society. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details of that, but the chapter was thriving quite well. And then I got a call from Jim Fitzgerald, who was my national field director at the time, and said, "We'd like to talk to you about coming to work for us." And so I came to work for the John Birch Society as a field coordinator in September of 2009. And they sent me to Wyoming because they hadn't had a coordinator out there. They wanted somebody to go out there and start building it. And I think, maybe they were secretly trying to kill me because the weather in Wyoming, I get a lot of snow out there. But I survived, And then what happened was the man that had this job, Oklahoma and Arkansas and North Texas at the time, today I have all of Arkansas and all of Oklahoma. He transferred, this guy transferred, and so I called the National Field Director and I said, hey, I want to transfer back to Oklahoma. Okay, and he said that would solve a lot of my problems. Get yourself a place to live and let's get it going. So I did. So I'm back and I'm not going anywhere, just to let you know. But that's my story. Anybody that's over 50 years old, and I know there's a couple of you in here, up in the 60s, and that guy down there is shaking his head, no, it's all right, you know, thou shalt not bear false witness. But anybody that has been around for a while has heard some kind of disparaging remarks about the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society was started in 1958 by a man named Robert Welch. Robert Welch was a genius. He was homeschooled before they called it homeschooling. When he was it 9 years old, I believe, he read all of the volumes of Ridpath's History of the World, which each volume was about that thick. I don't think they had any pictures. He had studied history and he had watched communism taking over in every single country around the globe as it was going on. He saw the way they did it. And so he wanted to start an organization to expose them. Now, there were tons of organizations out there that, were anti-communist at that time, but nobody was naming names. Nobody was naming names. So in 1958, he started the John Birch Society. The story of John Birch is he was a Christian missionary to China. He was killed, murdered by the Chinese communists 10 days after the close of the war. I don't have a whole lot of time, so I don't want to get into that whole story, but and his file was buried by our State Department because they didn't want to expose Mao Zedong. They didn't want to expose the communists. And a few years later, when Robert Welch was getting ready to start this organization, somebody handed him the declassified file on John Birch, and that's why we are called the John Birch Society. And by the way, we're not changing our name either. We're very proud of that. In 1961, 3 years later, because Mr. Welch knew that the one thing that these people couldn't take is exposure. So he started to write books, articles, got out there and started to spread the word around about what was going on, who was doing what with whom. And in 1961, the Communist Internationale, always remember this, it's international communism. When you hear that Russia's fighting with China and China's fighting with Cuba, that's all kabuki theater. They're all Marxists, every last one of them, okay? 1961 at the Communist Internationale meeting, Nikita Khrushchev, who was, other than the mass murdering part, was a really swell guy, I've been told, stood up in that meeting and said there are organizations in the United States that are hindering international communism and our growth and our takeover of America. And to paraphrase, he said, they must be flogged, they must be stopped, they must be destroyed. And he named one. And it was us. Very shortly after that, the Workers' World on the West Coast, out there in California, which proudly was a newspaper, proudly flying under the Communist Party USA masthead, wrote an article, Enter from Stage Right, the John Birch Society. We were accused of being communist at times. We were accused of being sexist, racist. You know the playbook. Just look at the president, not the one that's there now, okay? And you start seeing this. Look at any group of people, the Tea Parties, when they started up, right? It's always the same accusations. Well, the media in this country is controlled, all of it. And so Mr. Welch said, look, we're facing a satanic criminal conspiracy. Communism is not a form of government. It's a criminal conspiracy. Back home they had the mob, the wise guys. It's the same thing. It's the same type of a setup. And so after that article came out, the news media picked it up all over the country. And we were getting hit pieces on us by the hundreds every day for 10 years. Because they were trying to destroy us. They were trying to do what Mr. Khrushchev said to do. Guess what? It didn't happen. Then they went, after about 10 years of coming at us every single day, then they said, well, we'll just black them out like they don't exist. And so what you find today is the folks in this room that have been around for a while, okay, will have some kind of vague negative connotation of the Birch Society. They won't have a specific thing, but you know, it'll be there. The people that are under, say, 40, never heard of us. But we're still here. We publish a magazine twice a month. We have our bulletin. We have a website that is second to none. You would be surprised at the number of activists and names in the liberty movement that used to be in the John Birch Society, or still are, and started other groups. And so that's kind of our history, and that's what we do. Mr. Welch realized after the Birch Society had been around for a little while that globalists were using communists just like they use Islamists, just like they use, you know, it's like a hand with a few fingers on it, right? With 5 fingers on it, and they're, you know, the communists are 1 finger on the hand. The Birch Society has, at times, not been really well received because we say things that people don't like to hear. You ever hear of the prophets? Most of those guys had a great career and a really, really tough retirement plan. Okay? And so we were talking and naming names and telling people who was doing what with whom in politics, in the media, and everywhere else. I'll give you an example of something that happened in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was elected president, and a few years later, and the communism died in Russia one Tuesday afternoon or whatever it was, right? Go out and pick up your newspaper, and something that took 100 years to build is all of a sudden defunct. It's no longer there. No, it didn't die. And the reason that we knew that, see, we read their books. These people are so arrogant. And by the way, the whole idea of a conspiracy, just let me get that out of the way. Conspiracy theorists, Karl Marx used that term to degrade and discredit anybody that came against him and communism, okay? So, you know, anybody that's exposing this thing, right? And so we had a book by Anatoly Golitsyn called New Lies for Old that had been written several years before. He was a KGB defector. And he said, they're going to make it look like communism died in Russia, and the Soviet Union is now defunct, and they're going to lull the American people to sleep, and they're going to continue their takeover of the world. And by the way, America is the plum on the tree. That's the big one. If we fall, it's over. It's over. In these countries, everybody knows it. And so Anatoly Golitsyn even said back then, he said, I wouldn't even be surprised if they tore down the Berlin Wall. This is decades before it happened, okay? So when it came down, and if you want to think about it for a minute, how many of the people from the West went east? No. It was the other way around. And they exported communism in a huge, big way while we slept. And I'm ashamed to tell you, I was asleep at that time as well. Okay? But the news media, I mean, they're good at what they do because they're controlled. And they, you know, back when I was a kid, again, you know, 100 years ago, when I was a kid, you had 3 channels, and everybody sounded the same on the news channel. Now you got 103 channels, and they all sound the same still. Nothing changes. And they don't ever go to the real issue. They don't ever do that. They're up here, and I don't care which talking head it is, who your favorite conservative talk show guy, it doesn't matter. They've got some other issue that they're up here, because you see, their goal is not, by the way, to solve the problem. Their goal is to sell waterbeds, flowers, Snapple, and keep you mad enough that you'll come back after you kick the cat every night when you go home after listening to these people, that you'll come back the next day hoping that we've got a plan to fix this. Well, we do have a plan to fix it. We do. The number one thing is education. People have got to know what's going on. Our Constitution is the finest document that's ever been written to set up a government, ever. Our Declaration of Independence, I mean, that was God inspiring people. I'm not saying the Constitution is word for word inspired by God like the Bible, but you understand what I'm saying, right? God raises nations up, and he brings them down. Well, the thing of it is, we were infiltrated by, they didn't call themselves communists in the 1700s, but we were infiltrated then. The French Enlightenment. Remember when I said it was a satanic criminal conspiracy? The French Enlightenment was satanic. It led to the French Revolution. It led to the European Union. The New World Order, that phrase was coined by Marx. So here we're exposing the New World Order and people don't like to hear it. Why? Because they're making a living on it, a lot of times. But we have educational materials to expose this stuff, to expose the people that are doing it. And then, once you've read a little bit and gotten a little bit grounded, then you got to do something. I'm not standing up here saying you're going to join the John Birch Society and you're hiring some lawyer to save your country. We're not the NRA. Okay, we're not. We're here to give you the tools. We can train you. We can help you organize. And I am going to ask everybody to join today. If you've known us for a long time, or even just if you've agreed with our principles for a long time, which is everything is based on the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. Okay, in a minute I'm going to show you some of the materials, and I've got some for sale out there in front. If you've agreed with us for many, many years, our dues are $87 a year or $99 for a couple. If you've agreed with us for 20 years, you owe us $2,000. However, because I'm a big shot on staff, I can grant amnesty. So today, and today only, if you sign up today, I'll get you in under the wire for just this year's dues. Sound like a deal? All right. So when I'm done, I'm going to ask everybody, when the meeting is over, please meet me out front, and we've got apps, and we'd love to sign you up here and get you going. Okay, let me just show you some of the materials. This is our magazine, and I'm giving a copy. Anybody that wants one of these can have one today. These are free. This is the New American. It comes out twice a month to our members. This one is called The War on Local Police. You know, you see all these Back the Blue groups and everything? Well, guess what? We started our Support Your Local Police and keep them independent, because the push is to federalize and internationalize your police. Kind of like the Gestapo. American policing is unique because we have local police. And that's one thing that the Marxists and those folks don't like, okay? So we started our program, Support Your Local Police, and keep them independent in the 1960s. And we beat the civilian review boards when Nelson Rockefeller was running New York. He hated us. This is a book. You know this is a book. It's called The Deep State, the Invisible Government Behind the Scenes. We're exposing the Council on Foreign Relations, which has been around since the early 1900s. And it bills itself as a think tank and this and that. It was started by people like the Rockefellers and the Morgans and those kind of folks. And it is a quite a montage of people in the entertainment business, high up in the military, this and that, and they have tremendous influence. Every one of our presidents since this was started has either been a member of the CFR and or been surrounded by them. That's why Donald Trump could not drain the swamp. It's too deep. And by the way, they call it the deep state today. We just call it the conspiracy. Now, again, that word tends to offend people, but what is the definition of a conspiracy? Two or more people meeting in secret seeking to do harm to somebody. What's a football huddle? Thank you.